Zombies. Of all the threats and challenges that a fictional setting can throw at its heroes, zombies remain a fan favourite. The world's love of zombies defies genre and medium and has allowed this infamous undead creature to permeate throughout pop culture. Much like a swarm of the undead creatures themselves, their existence echoes across sci-fi,
We've got to go.
fantasy, modern stories, historical period pieces. You find them in films, TV shows, games, and books. So of course, their inclusion in D&D was a no-brainer. However, the zombies presented in the 5th edition of D&D are a little lackluster. They get the point across, but they aren't the most inspired adaptation, and they certainly don't leave your heroes with the same sense of fear and memorability that other mediums have accomplished. There's no deadly virus that will turn anyone bitten, they don't force skillful headshots to finally bring them down, and they don't have any special infected to spark horror in the hearts of their enemies. Now, I could have solved these problems myself and dreamed up some perfect zombies, uniquely suited to 5th edition D&D, but why do so much of the heavy lifting when there's quite literally hundreds of pieces of entertainment out there that have gone through these exact same thought processes themselves, and found some really exciting and memorable answers to the question, what makes a great zombie? With that in mind, I present you with 5 of cinema, gaming, and literature's best zombies as 5th edition monsters for you to use in your games. The Clicker. Let's start with arguably the most iconic zombie to emerge in the last 10 years. Using the legendary cordyceps fungus as the context behind these zombies, the Clicker has become one of the most memorable zombie variants to horrify fans of the Last of Us game, and recently appeared in the TV adaptation. From its fungal appearance to its bone-chilling clicks and shrieks, the Clicker has solidified itself as both a true horror monster and a fearsome enemy to be avoided. When adapting the Clicker for 5th edition, I first had to consider the threat level, or challenge rating, of this creature. Since Clickers are treated as a step above your standard Shamblers in the source material, I opted to do the same and set the CR to be about CR4. That meant assigning an AC and a HP that are matched to similarly rated creatures. After some debate as to the hardiness of a Clicker, I eventually settled on an AC of 12 via natural armor, and a HP of 5d8 plus 20, which averages out at about 42. With that out of the way, I chose its speed and its stat scores based on what felt appropriate, and then turned to its damage interactions. Due to its fungal nature, fire vulnerability made sense, and is supported by the fact that fire is one of the few ways to quickly deal with a Clicker in the original video game. Due to its armor of fungus, I gave it resistance to bludgeoning and slashing, but I left piercing as full damage, again to mirror the shiv to the head executions that the video game provides, as a surefire way of killing them. An immunity to poison and psychic damage also felt appropriate due to their undead nature. Their vision provided me with a few problems. Clickers are, for all intents and purposes, blind. They rely solely on sound to track their prey. 5e D&D has nothing like this in its official content, and as far as I could see, doesn't have any existing mechanics for handling this. All blind creatures I could find were simply given blind sight or earth tremor vision. But that won't work for our Clicker. After much consideration and toying with new mechanics, I eventually settled on the following. The Clicker has 10 foot of blind sight, but is totally blind beyond this range. My thinking here is that when it gets within 10 feet, it'll be able to hear the rustling of your clothes or the heavy breathing of a combatant. I paired this limited sight with an ability called hypersensitive hearing. This ability allows the Clicker to move up to 20 feet towards a noise source, as long as the source is within 60 feet. Attacks, spells with verbal components, or anything else that you as a DM decide make a noise this loud, is enough to trigger this ability, allowing the Clicker to immediately rush the sound. No reaction is needed for this, but once it does get within 10 feet of a target and the blind sight kicks in, it's unlikely to willingly leave that target in search of a new sound. While not perfect, I feel like this is enough of a band-aid for the lack of sound-based vision in 5th edition, and will make the Clicker's iconic blindness and powerful hearing translate into the game mechanics. The second ability I gave the Clicker is Fungal Helmet. A Clicker can only be killed with a well-placed shot to the head, and its head is covered with a thick layer of hard fungus. To make this mechanic function in 5th edition, I set some checks to the 2 rules that focus on accurate hitting: the attack roll and advantage. The clicker is not going to stand still and let you aim for its head, so in order to crack the fungal armor and destroy the brain, you either need to roll an excellent attack that is 10 or more higher than the AC, or attack while under the controlled benefit of advantage. Both of these requirements provide a mechanical ruling for the flavour of making precise attacks against a monster's head. This isn't to say that only attacks that meet these requirements damage the clicker, but if you want to finally bring it down, this is what it takes. As for its attacks, the clicker doesn't have anything especially nasty to call upon. It's just a relentless brawler that will stop at nothing to pummel and bite its target. Due to this, I felt that multi-attack for 2 slams or a single bite would suffice. However, the true threat of a zombie is its infectious bite, and the clicker is no different. Should the clicker land a bite and its target prove unable to resist the infection, the real danger of fighting zombies will emerge. The disease titled zombie fungus is a slow virus that will gradually kill the creature and, upon its death, return them as a zombie. For the first hours, there are no signs of infection. A particularly tricksome DM might decide to keep whether the character failed or succeeded the saving throw hidden, for drama. After the first hour, however, both the wisdom and dexterity scores are reduced by 1. At the end of each consecutive hour, these statistics reduce by a further 1. This continues until either of these stats is reduced to 1, at which point the infected creature dies. 1d4 days later, the creature will rise as a zombie, but not as a clicker. The clickers take many years to form. Now, the video game offers no escape from its zombie virus, but seeing as this is a character-driven game with powerful magic, and we don't want to guarantee the death of a character from a single roll, I've built in a possible route for curing an infected character. The lesser restoration spell would of course work. However, if your party doesn't have access to this spell or have run out of spell slots, they can enact a dangerous plan to burn out the infection. By forcing the creature to spend 3 hours in a location of extreme heat, the fungus can be burnt out. The virus won't just sit back and let this happen though, and will force the host to constantly try its hardest to flee the area. The entire party will be needed to keep their infected friend in the heat. And this concludes the clicker. Use it wisely. It is a nasty undead creature that can prove deadly long after it's been defeated. The Runner. Devilishly fast and with a total disregard for personal safety, the runners of World War Z are arguably one of the deadliest zombies I've concocted for this list. While the creature itself is only CR1, its ability to merge into a swarm and its extremely fast-acting virus makes it punch high above its weight. To counter these strengths, it does have some notable weaknesses. Let's talk about how I've translated this zerging zombie into 5th edition. Its AC is 14 due to its high dexterity. Its HP sits at 3d8 plus 6 or 19. Its speed is 30 feet, and it has saving throws, skills, and damage interactions that are appropriate for its lore. The first weakness comes in the form of its Blind to the Sick ability. Much like the book and film, the virus only wants to spread to a healthy host. While it is typically referring to sickness, I've included curses in this selective blindness. As such, the runner can only see and attack creatures that are not suffering from a disease or a curse. They are willing to retaliate though, so if one such unhealthy creature attacks the zombie first, it will fight back for a round and then move on to its intended targets. The second ability, and a much more dangerous one, is the Flood of Bodies feature. This allows a group of runners to dynamically become a swarm of runners in the moment. The wording is a little unclear, so I wanted to just clarify. The zombies must be stood within 5 feet of another zombie, and they need to form an unbroken chain. For example, a line or a ball of runners would work, but 5 isolated groups of 2 zombies would not. The swarm of runners is much more dangerous, and we'll get onto their stat block soon. When it came to the runners' attacks, I gave them 2 options. Due to its low CR, I didn't want to give it multi-attack, so it can either make a claw attack, which actively slows the target with a stacking debuff, or it can make a leaping bite. The bite deals less damage, but allows the runner to close the distance on its target, regardless of whether the attack actually hits. It's also the primary method of infecting a creature with the extremely nasty Runner's Strain. World War Z makes a point of how it only takes 12 seconds to turn after being bitten.
Here comes the number 12 train. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
I felt that for authenticity, I needed to match this, but make no mistake, I'm fully aware that this might be one of the deadliest scenarios your players can find themselves in. Upon being bitten and failing the relevant saving throws, a creature is immediately incapacitated as their body begins to spasm and convulse. At the end of each of its following rounds, the creature must attempt a Constitution saving throw. Failure means the virus progresses to its next steps. However, success merely means they've extended their limited time as the DC rises. Upon failing the Constitution saving throw, they are moved from the incapacitated condition to stunned. And even though they remain conscious and above 0 hit points, the creatures begin making death saving throws. Successes mean nothing in this situation. Becoming stabilized isn't an option. However, after 3 failed death saving throws, the creature dies and is risen as a runner 1d4 rounds later. There is but one method for curing a creature afflicted with Runner's Strain, beyond a lesser restoration spell. The limb must be cut off. If a brave party member can deal 12 or more slashing damage in a single attack, the sickened limb can be severed, removing the disease and its accompanying conditions. Rounding up the single runner zombie, they have access to a bonus action that helps portray their single-minded focus on reaching their target. Negligent sprinting allows them to take the dash action as a bonus action. However, they must take 1d4 damage whenever they do so. This is to simulate the way they recklessly throw themselves at wall and debris, or anything else that gets in their way. Moving on to the swarm of runners, this stat block contains all the features that the single runner has, but with some exciting additions. The ACE decreases while their speed increases. They also gain a climb speed. They gain a stack of new resistances and condition immunities, in line with other 5th edition swarms, as well as the swarm ability. The main juice of this creature, though, comes from its adapting stats based on the number of undead in the swarm. The stat block makes the assumption that 1 zombie equals 1 health, and depending on the HP of the swarm, its size, proficiency bonus, and various other modifiers can change to suit the threat of the swarm. I considered creating a small swarm and advising the DM run multiple if they wanted a large horde, but this felt kinda half-assed attempt to portray the literal oceans of undead we see in the film, so the variable swarm ability was made. Let me know if this feature needs further clarification in the comments. The only other new feature that the swarm gets is the Crushing Climb ability. This is another way of portraying the mindless, self-damaging movements that runners make. Depending on the size of the swarm, they take a varying amount of damage anytime they make use of its climb speed. And thus concludes the hyper-deadly segment of this video. Let's move on to something that won't necessarily kill your players, but will definitely give them a big old middle finger as it goes down. Yeah, so fun fact, the boomer has never been included in a cinematic, so I have nothing to put here. Very cool, Left 4 Dead. The popular video game, Left 4 Dead, introduced a bunch of interesting special infected, and really I could have chosen any of them to appear in this video. Hell, the entire video could have just been Left 4 Dead zombies. But since D&D seems to be missing the classic undead trope of self-destructing bomber enemies, I felt it was high time to amend that gap. So, I introduce you the 5e Boomer. The Boomer is designed from the ground up to die, but to look damn good doing it. Everything in its kit is in the effort of having the most glorious death a creature can have, and being at its strongest the moment it dies. From its low AC, vulnerability to piercing damage, and several of its abilities and actions, the Boomer is sure to become priority number 1 as soon as it appears on the battlefield. Its first ability, Stumbling Death, allows it to move just that 10 feet further before dying in an explosion of acid and gore. just in case it was that mere handful of steps away from glory. When it is reduced to 0 hit points, before it dies, it gets the chance to move up to 10 feet and take the explosive gore action. This doesn't require a reaction, so feel free to swing away with those opportunity attacks should they come up. The second ability, and arguably scarier of the two, is Luring Innards. Any creature hit by either explosive gore or acid vomit will be marked as a priority number 1 for all undead creatures within 60 feet of them. This lasts for 2 rounds and means that undead creatures will disregard other creatures and give the marked target their full, violent attention. When considering the boomer's attacks, I realised it didn't really need much. As long as it gets in close, its best course of action will always be to explode. Whether you immediately hit that boom button or give it some time to swing and hope the players kill it when they're still nearby is up to you. It has the basic slam attack, which it does pretty minimal damage, and I don't see it being used all that often, but I felt like it was needed as something like a default attack. Acidic Vomit is a once-a-day action that spreads acid in a 15-foot cone. It has no other side effects, but remember this does count as a way of marking targets for the Luring Innards ability. You only get one of these a day, so make the most of it. Try to target a separate group of creatures than the ones you're about to explode on. Lastly, it has its iconic Explosive Gore as a bonus action. When it gets close to one, or hopefully many, creatures, the boomer explodes, dying instantly and blasting the nearby targets with acid damage. It also triggers Luring Innards, so remember to have all your undead minions converge on the already reeling heroes. Okay, Boomer, looks like you're sorted. A pretty easy conversion, to be honest. Next, a zombie that doesn't quite fall into the undead category, but is every bit as dangerous. The Darkseekers. The film I Am Legend is probably more widely known for its traumatic dock scene than its unique take on zombie virus. But when deciding on which entries to add to this video, the Darkseekers were too unique to ignore. While not technically an undead zombie, they embody many similarities, including a hunger for living flesh, the way its infection spreads, and their horde-like communities. Where they differ is in physical strength, intelligence, a weakness to sunlight, and of course the fact they are living creatures and not undead. When translating this creature to 5th edition, I started by assigning stats that are appropriate for the performance seen on screen. They are clearly fast, strong, and durable. Unlike most zombies, a Darkseeker is a real threat even on its own. It doesn't rely on hordes, so I decided to give it a CL5 as a baseline. They're seen climbing multiple times in the film, so a climb speed felt appropriate. Due to them not being an undead, I didn't give them the damage or condition immunities that I have to the other options in this video. Instead, they have advanced sunlight sensitivity. This feature functions much the same as sunlight sensitivity that we're all used to on kobolds and drow, but it has the additional effect that if the creature ends its turn in direct sunlight, it takes 2d6 fire damage. This is to help portray the severe burning effect the sun seems to have on Darkseekers in the film. As such, this might be a zombie variant that's highly suited to use in the Underdark. Imagine how nasty these guys would be if they sparked an Underdark zombie outbreak. The Darkseekers are seen throwing themselves at their prey, so the second ability is Charging Strikes. This is a pretty simple buff for their first initiating attack. If they move at least 20 feet in a straight line before making an attack, it deals an additional 1d8 damage if it hits. Perfect for when they finally catch up with a fleeing enemy, or they first smash into melee. The last ability given to the Darkseekers is Changed but Not Lost. Rather uniquely for a zombie film, I Am Legend proves that Darkseekers can actually be cured, even after years of being one. This ability allows disease-curing spells and abilities, such as Lesser Restoration, to cure Darkseekers of their virus, returning them from the flesh-eating aberration to their original humanoid form. Figuring this out could lead to some really unique encounters, where the party needs to defend and stall until their cleric or druid can cure the actively hostile Darkseekers, or even a quest to find and cure an important person of interest amid a nest of the monsters. As for their attacks, the Darkseekers get multi-attack for 2 slams, or they can make 1 bite attack. Their slams are basic, damaging attacks. However, if their attack roll is at least 5 higher than the target's AC, the target is also pushed 5 feet. This is to portray the sheer power behind these creatures and their strikes. The Infectious Bite attack deals less base damage than the Slam, but it has the chance to infect the target with the Crippin virus, the Darkseekers version of a zombie virus. It takes 3 hours for the diseased creature to become a Darkseeker, after which the humanoid becomes an aberration. Due to the prevalence of disease-curing mechanics in this creature's stat block, the extra way to cure the diseased and currently turning person is to have them ingest an already cured creature's blood. This will facilitate some really interesting encounter design, where your party needs to find someone who's already been cured in order to cure their ally or themselves. Of course, this can be bypassed by lesser restoration or similar magics. Personally, when running a story arc revolving around Darkseekers, I'd use the risk of turning as a secondary plot point and a resource drain and not a true threat. The real threat comes from their physical strength and their potential to spread throughout NPCs or important locations. Rounding up the Darkseeker stat block, they have the Retreat from Dawn reaction. This is a simple ability that lets them flee to the safety of shadows should they find themselves taking damage from their advanced sunlight sensitivity. And that wraps up the Darkseekers. Our last entry is by far the most dangerous combatant on this list. A self-inflicted undead that combines undead resilience with powerful shadow magic. The Necromancer. From the mysterious world of the Skullduggery Pleasent novels, the Necromancers are dark mages that have infected themselves with the zombie virus in order to extend their lives and become commanders of the undead hordes. More so than most entries on this video, I had to take some creative liberties to translate these creatures into 5th edition. However, I tried to stay true to the source material wherever possible. Combining the magical power of a dark caster and the advantages of undeath, I felt the Necromancers had to be a serious threat. As such, I aimed for CR 10 when I built them out. The HP, AC, and stat scores should mirror this. Alright, this is a pretty big stat block, so I'm going to try and lightning round this. Firstly, aim for the head. They turned themselves into an undead, so they could basically survive any attack and stitch themselves back together, provided the brain survived. I felt the clicker handled this trait pretty well, so I kind of just ripped it off and gave it to the Necromancer as well. Sue me. Next, we have the Last Laugh. The main character in Skullduggery Pleasant has once used necromancy and their sheer desire for revenge to keep fighting even after death. To portray this effect, once the necromancer is killed, before it gets removed from combat, it gets to take a full, final turn of combat, allowing it to try and get some sweet revenge. Shadowy form has 2 effects. Firstly, it means if the necromancer is stood in darkness, it is considered invisible. Secondly, it means that if it ends its turn in darkness, it gains 15 hit points. Our final ability is Shadow Magic Object. This is honestly more about the flavor than about mechanics, but it does open up a potentially interesting scenario should your players learn the truth. Necromancers cannot wield shadow magic directly, so they must harness it via an item. This could be a ring, a brooch, a cane, or anything else that they can keep on them. Should this item be stolen or destroyed, the Necromancer will lose access to its shadow magic. I felt the best way to design this would be to strategically name all the affected features with the word shadow, even if they are named differently in the book. This way, you know exactly what abilities you are going to lose access to without me needing to list every single one of them in this stat block. Clever, right? As for its actions and attacks, it has 5 options. Firstly, it can bite. This does very little damage for its CR, and ideally, nothing will ever be close enough for you to need to use this. Its primary attack is Weaponized Shadow. This ranged magic attack allows it to manipulate its shadow magic into blades, bludgeons, or pure death energy, and strike at range against 3 separate creatures up to 60 feet away. I didn't give the Necromancer multi-attack simply because this single action can target 3 creatures instead. It essentially amounts to the same result, but forces the Necromancer to split its focus instead of focusing down one enemy. When you're commanding the legions of undead, you don't really have time to give one person your entire attention. Shadow Walk is a simple 15-foot teleport on a 5 or 6 recharge. Since you don't need to see where you're going, it is ideal for bamfing through walls or escaping grapples, but it's not great for creating distance. Bubble of Shadows, known as Bubble of Death in the books, is a large 20-foot radius sphere that drains energy from those within to bolster the Necromancer. It can be used once a day, and any creature that fails its saving throw has its strength score reduced. As long as one creature fails, the Necromancer begins dealing more damage with its weaponized shadows for 1 minute. Lastly, Pillar of Shadows lifts the Necromancer into the sky where it is safe from melee damage. This pillar is made of shadowy mist and as such cannot be targeted, damaged, or broken in any way. The Necromancer can use this action 3 times a day. Alongside these actions, it has a bonus action. The Necromancer can command all undead within 120 feet to move up to their speed and make a melee attack. This is where the real threat of a Necromancer comes from. They turn a possibly mild undead threat into a relentless surge of constantly encroaching death. When designing encounters, remember to account for the undead minions essentially being able to act twice around. Don't overdo it. Lastly, they get the shield spell, renamed Shadow Shield to make sure they lose the reaction should they lose their shadow magic item, and given freely each round to make up for their pretty low AC. And with that, we are done. 5 iconic zombies given new life in 5th edition D&D. You can get the stat blocks for each of these monsters for free by clicking the link in the description. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it, then like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you'd like the focus of the next video to be in the comments. Iconic vampires, fantasy's best magic items, your favorite heroes as subclasses. Whatever it is, I'm sure I can come up with something fun and unique. Links for my Discord, Twitch, Twitter below. And with that, I will see you next time, you nasty little DMs.